Shalom, I'm Rabbi Jonathan, and today I'm reading Exodus chapters 13, 14, and 15. I'm reading from the TLV, the Tree of Life version of the Bible. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Consecrate to me all the firstborn from every womb of Bnei Israel, both men and animals. This is mine." Moses said to the people, "Remember this day on which you came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by a strong hand Adonai brought you out from this place. No chametz may be eaten. This day in the month of Aviv you are going out. When Adonai brings you into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, you are to observe this service during this month. For 7 days you are to eat matzah, and the seventh day is to be a feast to Adonai. Matzot is to be eaten throughout the 7 days, and no chametz is to be seen among you, nor within any of your borders. You are to tell your son on that day, saying, 'It is because of what Adonai did for me when I came out of Egypt. So it will be like a sign on your hand, and a reminder between your eyes, so that the Torah of Adonai may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand Adonai has brought you out of Egypt. You are to keep this ordinance as a moed from year to year.' Now when Adonai brings you into the land of the Canaanite, as he swore to you and your fathers, and gives it you, you are to set apart to Adonai every firstborn from the womb, and every firstborn male animal you have will be Adonai's. Every firstborn donkey you are to redeem with a lamb, and if you do not redeem it, then you are to break its neck, but you are to redeem every firstborn male among your sons. So when your son asks you in times to come, 'What is this?' say to him, 'By a strong hand Adonai brought us out from Egypt, the house of bondage. And when Pharaoh refused to let us go, Adonai slew all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both men and animals. So I sacrificed to Adonai all firstborn males, but I redeemed the firstborn of my sons. So it will be like a sign on your hand and like frontlets between your eyes. For by a strong hand Adonai brought us out of Egypt." After Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not lead them along the road to the land of the Philistines, although that was nearby. For God said, "The people might change their minds if they see war and return to Egypt." So God led the people around by the way of the wilderness to the Sea of Reeds, and Bnei Israel went up out of the land of Egypt armed. Moses also took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had made Bnei Israel swear an oath, saying, "God will surely remember you, and then you are to carry my bones away with you." So they journeyed from Succoth and encamped in Etham, on the edge of the wilderness. Adonai went before them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them light, so they could travel both day and night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night never departed from the people. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Bnei Israel, so that they turn back and encamp before Pi Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. You are to camp by the sea, opposite Baal Zephon. Pharaoh will say concerning Bnei Israel, 'They are wandering aimlessly in the land. The wilderness has shut them in.' I will harden Pharaoh's heart, so he will follow after them. Then I will be glorified over Pharaoh, along with all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am Adonai." So they did so. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his servants had a change of heart toward the people, and they said, "What is this we have done, that we let Israel go from serving us?" So he prepared his chariots and took his people with him. He took 600 of the finest chariots, along with all other chariots of Egypt, and captains over them. Adonai hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so he pursued Bnei Israel, for Bnei Israel went out with a high hand. But the Egyptians pursued them with all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, as well as his charioteers and his army, and overtook them as they were encamped by the sea, beside Pi-hahiroth, opposite Baal-zephon. When Pharaoh drew near, Bnei Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them. So they were terrified, and Bnei Israel cried out to Adonai. They said to Moses, "Have you taken us away to die in the wilderness because there were no graves in Egypt? Why have you dealt this way with us, to bring us out of Egypt? Did we not say to you in Egypt, 'Let us alone, so that we may serve the Egyptians'? It was better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. But Moses said to the people, "Don't be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of Adonai, which he will perform for you today. You have seen the Egyptians today, but you will never see them again, ever. Adonai will fight for you while you hold your peace." Then Adonai said to Moses, "Why are you crying to me? Tell Bnei Israel to go forward. Lift up your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. Then Bnei Israel will go into the midst of the sea on dry ground. Then behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will go in after them, so that I will be glorified over Pharaoh and all his army, his chariots and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians will know that I am Adonai, when I have been glorified over Pharaoh, his chariots and his horsemen." Then the angel of God, who went before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them. Also the pillar of cloud moved from in front and stood behind them, and so came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. There was the cloud and the darkness over here, yet it gave light by night over there. Neither one came near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. Adonai drove the sea back with a strong east wind throughout the night, and turned the sea into dry land. So the waters were divided. Then Bnei Israel went into the midst of the sea on the dry ground, while the waters were like walls to them on their right and on their left. But the Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. Now it came about during the morning watch that Adonai looked at the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud, and caused the army of the Egyptians to panic. He took off their chariot wheels and caused them to drive heavily, so that the Egyptians said, "Get away from the presence of Israel, for Adonai fights for them against the Egyptians." Then Adonai said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters come back upon the Egyptians, over their chariots and their horsemen." So Moses stretched his hand out over the waters, and the sea returned to its strength at the break of dawn. The Egyptians were fleeing from it, but Adonai overthrew them in the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, and the entire army of Pharaoh that went after them into the sea. Not one of them remained. But Bnei Israel had walked on dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were like walls to them, on their right hand and on their left. So Adonai saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. When Israel saw the great work that Adonai did over the Egyptians, the people feared Adonai, and they believed in Adonai and in his servant Moses. Then Moses and Bnei Israel sang this song to Adonai. "I will sing to Adonai, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea. Adonai is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will glorify him, my father's God, and I will exalt him. Adonai is a warrior. Adonai is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he has hurled into the sea, and his chosen captains have sunk into the sea of reeds. The deeps cover them. They sank to the depths like a stone. Your right hand, Adonai, is glorious in power. Your right hand, Adonai, dashes the enemy to pieces. In the greatness of your excellency, you overthrow those who resist you. You send forth your wrath. It consumes them as stubble. With the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The floods stood upright as a heap. The deeps became firm, ground in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My lust shall gorge on them. I will draw my sword, my hand will destroy them. You blew with your wind, the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you, Adonai, among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, awesome in praises, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. You, in your loving kindness, led the people you have redeemed. You guided them in your strength to your holy habitation. When the peoples hear, they will tremble. Anguish will seize the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom are terrified. Trembling grips Moab's mighty men. All of Canaan's inhabitants will melt away. Terror and dread will fall on them. By the greatness of your arm, they become still as a stone. Till your people cross over, Adonai. Till the people whom you purchased cross over. You bring them in, and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, the place, Adonai, that you have made for yourself to dwell in, the sanctuary, Adonai, which your hands have prepared. Adonai will reign forever and ever. For Pharaoh's horses with his chariots and his horsemen went into the sea, but Adonai brought the waters of the sea back over them. Yet Bnei Israel walked in the midst of the sea on dry ground. Then Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out after her, with tambourines and with dancing. As Miriam sang to them, "Sing to Adonai, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea." Then Moses led Israel onward from the Sea of Reeds. They went out into the wilderness of Shur, but they traveled 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink from the waters because they were bitter. On account of this it was called Marah. So the people complained to Moses, saying, "What are we going to drink?" So he cried out to Adonai, and Adonai showed him a tree. When he threw it into the waters, they were made sweet. There he made a statute and an ordinance for them, and there he tested them. He said, "If you diligently listen to the voice of Adonai your God, do what is right in his eyes, pay attention to his mitzvot, and keep all his decrees, I will put none of the diseases on you, which I have put on the Egyptians. For I am Adonai who heals you." Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. So they camped there by the waters.